When $9 million in Bitcoin vanishes from a high-security vault at a top Silicon Valley crypto firm, suspicion falls on an unlikely figure, the night janitor, Elias Monroe. Known for his quiet demeanor and spotless work ethic, Elias disappears without a trace the same night the digital fortune is wiped clean. Investigators initially suspect foul play, but as they dig deeper into Elias's past, they uncover a web of secrets, betrayals, and a motive far more personal than greed. What begins as a cybercrime investigation spirals into a psychological thriller that forces everyone involved to confront their own assumptions and their own guilt. The hum of servers echoed through the polished corridors of Halcyon Technologies, a crypto security firm nestled in the heart of Palo Alto. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday. The building was empty, save for the night janitor, Elias Monroe. Elias moved like clockwork. His mop glided across the marble floors with quiet precision, his cart neatly organized with supplies. He wore a faded blue jumpsuit, a name tag barely legible from years of wear. No one paid him much attention during the day. He preferred it that way, but that night something changed. At 6:03 a.m., the first employee to arrive, Dev Patel, a junior systems analyst, swiped his badge and entered the building. He noticed nothing unusual until he logged into the company's secure crypto vault interface. The screen blinked once, then again. The balance read $0. Dev froze. The vault had held over $9 million in Bitcoin just hours before. He checked the logs. No alerts, no breach notifications, no trace of a transfer. He called his supervisor. Within minutes, the building was in lockdown. By 7 a.m., Halcyon's internal security team had launched a full-scale investigation. The FBI was notified by 9 o'clock, and Elias Monroe was nowhere to be found. His cart was still parked in the janitor's closet. His jumpsuit hung neatly on a hook. His badge lay on the floor, snapped in half. Security footage showed Elias entering the server room at 2:19 a.m. He was alone. He exited at 2:26 a.m. carrying nothing. Then he walked out the back door, past the dumpsters, and vanished into the night. No one saw him again. Elias Monroe had worked at Halcyon Technologies for 6 years. He was hired through a third-party custodial service, and his background check had raised no red flags, no criminal record, no debt, no known family. He lived in a modest studio apartment in East Palo Alto, paid rent on time, and rarely spoke to anyone. His co-workers barely noticed him. He arrived at 10 p.m., left by 6 a.m., and kept to himself. The only person who ever exchanged more than a few words with Elias was the building's security guard, Ramon Vega. He was polite, Ramon told investigators. Quiet, always had a book in his pocket. Philosophy, I think, never talked about himself. Elias's apartment was clean, too clean. Investigators found no personal photographs, no journals, no computer, just a bed, a small bookshelf, and a single framed photo on the wall. A woman standing in front of a lighthouse, smiling. Her face was partially obscured by sunlight. There was no name on the frame, no note, no clue. The custodial company had no emergency contact listed for Elias. His phone number was disconnected. His bank account had been closed 2 days before the Bitcoin vanishing. It was as if Elias had planned his disappearance down to the minute. But why would a janitor, someone with no access to the crypto vault, be able to erase $9 million in Bitcoin? Halcyon's vault was protected by multi-layer encryption, biometric access, and a rotating key protocol. Only 5 employees had clearance. Elias wasn't one of them, yet the logs showed no breach, no forced entry, no malware, just a single command line entry at 2:24 a.m. Vault. Erase, confirm. The command required 2-factor authentication. It had been executed from inside the building, from a terminal in the server room, and Elias was the only person seen entering that room. Special Agent Marissa Keane of the FBI's Cybercrime Division had seen her share of digital heists. But this one was different. There was no breach, no malware, no ransom note. Just a clean, irreversible command that wiped $9 million in Bitcoin from Halcyon's vault. She stared at the terminal logs in the server room, replaying the security footage of Elias Monroe entering and exiting. No gloves, no tools, no USB sticks, just a man in a janitor's uniform, walking in and out like he belonged there. "Where's the second factor?" she asked Halcyon's CTO, a jittery man named Leonard Cho. Leonard rubbed his temples. "It's biometric, retina scan, and voice confirmation. Only 5 people have access. Could Elias have spoofed it?" Leonard shook his head. "Impossible. The system requires a live scan. No recordings, no photos. It's built to detect spoofing." Marissa leaned closer to the terminal. Then someone gave him access. The audit logs showed the command was executed under the credentials of Halcyon's head of security, Dana Rourke. Dana was on vacation in Iceland at the time, with flight records and hotel check-ins to prove it. But her credentials had been used. Her biometric profile had been matched. Marissa requested Dana's access logs. That's when she found the first anomaly. 3 weeks before the heist, Dana had logged into the system from an unregistered terminal. The session lasted 17 minutes. No commands were executed, but the biometric data was accessed. Could someone have cloned her profile? Marissa asked. Leonard hesitated. In theory, yes, but it would require physical access to the biometric scanner and a deepfake-level voice sample. Marissa turned back to the footage. Elias had entered the server room, but he hadn't touched the scanner. Then she noticed something odd. In the corner of the room, behind the main terminal, was a small maintenance panel. It was open. Does that panel connect to the biometric system? Leonard's face went pale. It's not supposed to, but if someone knew how to reroute the input. Marissa nodded. Then Elias didn't erase the Bitcoin. Someone used him. She pulled up Elias's employment file again. No tech background, no known aliases, but one detail stood out. Elias had once worked as a janitor at a biotech firm in San Jose. That firm had been involved in biometric research. It had shut down after a data breach 5 years ago. The lead engineer on that project, Dana Rourke. Marissa's pulse quickened. She dug deeper into Dana's history. Before Halcyon, Dana had worked at 3 different firms. Each had suffered minor breaches. Each had employed Elias Monroe in a custodial role. It was no coincidence. Elias had followed Dana for years. But why? Special Agent Marissa Keane sat in her car outside Elias Monroe's old apartment in San Jose. The building was a crumbling relic of the early 2000s. Its stucco peeling, its windows fogged with age. Elias had lived here for 2 years before moving to East Palo Alto. No one remembered him. But the biotech firm he'd worked for, Janitor Systems, was another story. Janitor had been a rising star in biometric encryption, developing retina-based access systems for government contracts. In 2020, it suffered a catastrophic breach. Millions in research were lost. The lead engineer, Dana Rourke, resigned weeks later. Elias Monroe disappeared from the company roster the same day. Marissa pulled the old employee records. Elias hadn't been listed as a janitor. He'd been a lab assistant. She stared at the screen. Why would someone with lab credentials become a janitor? She dug deeper. Elias Monroe wasn't his real name. His birth name was Elijah M. Rosen. He'd earned a degree in applied mathematics from UC Berkeley, graduated top of his class, worked briefly for a cybersecurity firm before vanishing from the tech world. The reason? His fiancée, Dr. Lila Voss, had died in a lab accident at Janitor. Marissa found the incident report, a fire in the biometric testing chamber, faulty wiring. Lila had been alone, running late-night simulations. Elias had been off shift, but the report was vague, too vague. She tracked down one of Lila's former colleagues, a retired engineer named Marcus Bell. She didn't die in a fire, Marcus said, voice trembling. She was locked in. The biometric system failed. It didn't recognize her scan. She couldn't get out. Marissa's breath caught. Who designed the system? Marcus hesitated. Dana Rourke. Elias had watched the woman he loved die because of a biometric failure. and the company had buried it. Dana had walked away with a promotion. Elias had walked away with nothing. He changed his name, became a ghost, and followed Dana from company to company, waiting. Marissa stared at the photo from Elias's apartment, the woman in front of the lighthouse. It was Lila. Elias hadn't stolen the Bitcoin for money. He'd erased it, a symbolic act, a ledger wiped clean. But someone had helped him. Because Elias didn't have access to Dana's credentials, someone inside Halcyon had given them to him, and Marissa was about to find out who. The photograph had haunted Marissa since she first saw it in Elias's apartment. A woman standing in front of a lighthouse, sunlight washing out half her face. She was smiling, but there was something melancholic in her posture, like she knew the moment would be her last. Marissa had the image enhanced. The lighthouse was identified as Pigeon Point, south of Half Moon Bay. She drove there on a foggy morning, hoping for answers. The keeper's house had been converted into a small museum. Inside, she found a guest book dating back 10 years. On a page from 2019, two names were written in looping cursive: Elijah Rosen and Lila Voss. Marissa traced the ink with her finger. They'd visited together, before the accident, before Elias became a ghost. She asked the curator if he remembered them. "I remember her," he said. She asked about the history of the lens, said she was studying light refraction. He just watched her, like she was the only thing in the room. Marissa felt a pang of something she couldn't name. Elias hadn't just lost a partner. He'd lost his anchor. Back in Palo Alto, she reviewed the footage again. Elias is entering the server room. The open maintenance panel, the command line entry. Then she noticed something new, a shadow. Just before Elias entered, a figure passed by the hallway, too fast to identify, but the timestamp was clear, 2:17 a.m., 2 minutes before Elias arrived. She enhanced the frame. The figure was wearing a Halcyon hoodie. The badge was obscured, but the gait was familiar. She ran it through the employee database. Match Dev Patel, the same analyst who discovered the missing Bitcoin. Marissa pulled Dev's access logs. He'd logged into the system at 1:58 a.m., nearly an hour before his usual arrival. His session had been terminated at 2:16 a.m., 1 minute before Elias entered. She confronted Dev in the Halcyon break room. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, voice trembling. "You were there," Marissa said. "You rerouted the biometric input. You gave Elias's access." Dev's eyes darted. "He came to me, said he needed help, said it was justice." "Why would you help him?" Dev swallowed. "Because my brother died in the Genodyne breach. He was a junior coder. They blamed him for the firewall failure, but it was Dana's design." Marissa stared at him. "You knew Elias was Elijah Rosen?" Dev nodded. "He told me everything, said he didn't want the money, just wanted the system to feel what he felt. Erased, forgotten." Marissa sat in silence. Elias hadn't acted alone. He built a quiet alliance. People who'd been hurt, people who'd been silenced. And now he was gone, but the photograph remained. A woman in the light, a man in the shadows. The notebook was found tucked behind a loose panel in Elias's old studio apartment. It was leather-bound, weathered, and smelled faintly of cedar. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, diagrams, and cryptic equations. But one page stood out. It was titled, "The Ledger." Marissa flipped through the entries. They weren't financial records. They were memories. Lila's laugh echoed in the lab when the retinal scanner failed for the third time. She said, "Even machines know when we're tired." Dana dismissed the error logs, said they were statistical noise. Lila stayed late to prove her wrong. The fire wasn't the tragedy. The silence afterward was. Each entry was a fragment of Elias's grief, stitched together like a mosaic of loss. He hadn't just erased Bitcoin. He'd erased a system that had failed him and others. The final page was a letter. "To whom it may concern, I did not steal your money. I erased your illusion. You built a fortress of trust on faulty stone. You called it innovation. I called it betrayal. Lila believed in light, in clarity, in truth. You buried her in silence. I buried your ledger in the same. This is not revenge. It is remembrance. Marissa closed the notebook, her hands trembling. She understood now. Elias had orchestrated a symbolic act, a reckoning. He'd used the tools of the system to dismantle its illusion of security. And he'd done it with precision, patience, and pain. But he hadn't done it alone. Dev Patel had helped him. Others might have too. Marissa requested a deeper audit of Halcyon's employee records. She found 3 more anomalies, employees with ties to Janitor, all hired within months of Dana's arrival. It wasn't a heist. It was a quiet rebellion, and Elias had been its architect. The boardroom at Halcyon Technologies was silent as Agent Marissa Keane laid out her findings. The executives sat in stunned disbelief, their polished confidence cracking under the weight of what she revealed. Elias Monroe was not who you thought he was, she began. He was Elijah Rosen, a former biometric systems analyst whose fiancée died due to a failure in a system designed by your head of security, Dana Rourke. Dana, seated at the far end of the table, didn't flinch. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. Marissa continued, "He followed you from company to company, not to harm you but to watch, to wait, until he could dismantle the illusion you built." Dana finally spoke. "You're suggesting I'm responsible for a man's breakdown? I'm suggesting you covered up a fatal flaw in your system," Marissa said, "and that you've done it before." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were internal memos from Janitor, emails from Dana dismissing safety concerns, and a suppressed report from a junior engineer, Lila Voss, warning of biometric misreads under certain lighting conditions. Dana's jaw tightened. "You buried her report," Marissa said, "and when she died, you let the company blame a junior coder, Elias's friend." The room was still. Then Leonard Cho, the CTO, spoke up. "There's more," he said, voice low. "We found a hidden partition on Dana's terminal, encrypted. We cracked it this morning." He tapped a key. The screen behind him lit up with a list of transactions, small, frequent, and routed through privacy coins. "You were siphoning funds from the vault," Leonard said. "Tiny amounts, over years. You used Elias's erasure as cover to wipe the trail." Dana stood. "You have no proof. We have your voice print," Marissa said, "matched to the biometric override Elias used. You gave him access, not out of guilt, but to frame him." Dana's face went pale. "You knew he was planning something symbolic," Marissa said. "So you let him do it. Then you vanished the rest of the funds and made it look like he took them." Dana lunged for the door, but 2 agents were already there. As they cuffed her, she turned to Marissa. "He was going to do it anyway. I just made sure it cost him everything." Marissa stared at her. "He already lost everything." Dana was led away. The room was quiet again, but the silence felt different now. Not hollow, just honest. 3 days after Dana Rourke's arrest, a ping lit up on Agent Marissa Keane's encrypted terminal. It was a location trace, a signal from a burner phone registered to an alias Elias had used years ago. The signal came from a small town in Oregon, a place called Yatchins, nestled along the coast, quiet and remote. Marissa booked a flight. She arrived at dawn. The town was misty, the ocean roaring in the distance. She checked into a motel and began canvassing. Most locals hadn't seen anyone new, but the lighthouse keeper at Cape Perpetua had. "Saw a man 2 days ago," he said. "Tall, quiet. Asked about the lens system. Said he used to study light." Marissa's heart raced. She climbed the trail to the lighthouse. It was locked, but the keeper gave her access. Inside, the air was cool and still. She walked up the spiral staircase, each step echoing like a heartbeat. At the top, she found him. Elias Monroe, Elijah Rosen, stood by the lens, staring out at the sea. He didn't flinch when she approached. "I knew you'd come," he said. Marissa stepped closer. "Why here?" He smiled faintly. "Lila loved this place. said light bends but never breaks. They stood in silence. I read your notebook, Marissa said. I understand why you did it. Elias nodded. It wasn't about the money. It was about the silence. The way they erased her. I wanted them to feel it. You succeeded, she said. But Dana used you. She stole the rest. Elias's jaw tightened. I suspected, but I couldn't stop her. I wasn't interested in justice. Just closure. Marissa hesitated. You know I have to bring you in. Elias turned to her. I didn't steal anything. I didn't profit. I erased a ledger. That's not a crime. It's a statement. She looked at him. A man hollowed by grief, filled with purpose. I can't promise what the courts will say, she said, but I'll tell them everything. Elias nodded. Then let's go. As they walked down the spiral stairs, Marissa felt something shift. Not in the case, but in herself. She chased a criminal, found a mourner, and uncovered a truth deeper than any ledger. Some losses aren't meant to be avenged, only remembered. Elias Monroe stood before the federal magistrate in San Francisco. His hands folded, his expression calm. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, halcyon executives, cybersecurity experts, and a few silent faces from his past. Marissa Keane sat behind the prosecution table, her report submitted, her testimony given. She told the truth. Elias hadn't stolen the Bitcoin. He'd erased it, symbolically, deliberately, and without personal gain. The judge reviewed the evidence, the notebook, the audit logs, the biometric rerouting, Dana Rourke's encrypted transactions. Elias's actions had triggered the investigation, but Dana's betrayal had been the crime. The verdict was swift. Dana Rourke was sentenced to 12 years for wire fraud, obstruction, and conspiracy. Elias Monroe was released with no charges, but not without consequence. He walked out of the courthouse into a sea of cameras. He didn't speak. He didn't wave. He simply walked. Marissa caught up with him near the steps. What will you do now? She asked. Elias looked at the sky. I don't know. I spent so long chasing silence. Maybe now I'll chase light. She nodded. You could help people. Teach. Build something new. He smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe I'll just live. Weeks passed. Halcyon rebuilt its systems. Elias disappeared again, this time by choice. But his story lingered. Cybersecurity forums debated his methods. Ethics panels dissected his motives. Some called him a vigilante, others a philosopher. But those who knew the full story understood. Elias hadn't erased Bitcoin. He had erased a lie. And in doing so, he'd written something far more valuable. A ledger of truth, grief, and quiet resistance. Marissa kept the notebook, not as evidence, but as a reminder that sometimes justice isn't loud. It's patient, it's precise, and it begins with a man pushing a mop down a marble hallway, carrying the weight of a world no one saw until it vanished. You've just entered the crime. Subscribe for more thrilling stories.